Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us for the 23rd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, India's premier platform for deliberating the discourse around sustainability and climate change. My name is Shweta Gautam and I am a research associate here at TERI and will be emceeing today's proceeding. The session today is on the leadership panel, Infrastructure, Resilience and Oceans. For this session, we have the Ministerial Address by His Excellency Mr. Vatimi Rayalu, Minister, Ministry of Agriculture and Waterways, Fiji. I request you, sir, to please kindly come on the dais. Can we have a round of applause? For the interactive discussions, we have His Excellency, Her Excellency Ms. May Ellen Stenner, Norwegian Ambassador to India. So please, ma'am, requesting you to please come on the dais. Thank you. Next we have Mr. Amrit Prothi, Director General, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Ms. Shlok Nath, CEO, India Climate Collaborative. And Mr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, Senior Editor from NDTV India. The session will be chaired by Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI. Dr. Vibha Dhawan is the Director General of the Energy and Resources Institute. During 2005, it's lovely. Okay. Ma'am, over to you, ma'am.
Well, we want to save time, and I'm sure you have heard n number of times who I am, and so that's enough. So I'll say welcome to the second day, the formal sessions of WSTS. We are a little late, so therefore I'm just going to say welcome to all because they are going to talk about the subject, and if time permits, I'll speak in the end. So, because we are almost 25 minutes behind schedule, so let's try to do as much as we can condense our presentations. So, may I request for the Ministerial Address, His Excellency Mr. Vatimi Rayalu, Minister, Ministry of Agriculture and Waterways from Fiji.
Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, organizers, ladies and gentlemen. Nisambulu Binaka, I thank TERI and the organizers once again for inviting me to be part of this 2024 World Sustainable Development Summit. And I congratulate you again for your 50 years and to the Government of India for hosting this year's event. In 2018, the Government of Fiji signed a declaration of partnership with TERI, and this partnership took place after a successful Fiji-India Sustainable Development Conference in Suva in May 2017. TERI was the knowledge partner for the SDC, an event that was organized under the Government of India's Forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation agenda, and Fiji's leadership in 2018 was recognized by TERI through its Sustainable Development Leadership Award. As an island nation, Fiji is vulnerable to the effects of climate change due to its geographical location, and its exposure to extreme weather conditions like tropical cyclones, flooding, coastal erosion, and coastal inundation has been exacerbated due to climate change. This poses major challenges to the achievement of our National Development Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, infrastructure in Fiji is mostly situated in the coastal and floodplain areas, making it vulnerable to many hazards such as sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, tidal surges, flooding, and coastal inundation and erosion. And our transport system found problems with other infrastructure systems. Water infrastructure is critical as a concern, as water is a major input in agricultural activities, industry, electricity generation, sanitation, and of course human consumption. Climate change will restrict the number and efficacy of future possible adaptation measures for infrastructure. Climate change poses significant problems also for our food and nutrition security in Fiji. Much of our arable land for agriculture activities is around the coastal areas and are affected by sea level rise. Additionally, soil erosion from extreme precipitation events, including riverbank erosion, results in much of the country's topsoil being lost, which has significant implications for long-term food and nutrition security. Ladies and gentlemen, recognizing the urgency to act, Fiji has set ambitious targets as part of its nationally determined contributions, including transitioning to nearly 100% renewable energy-based grid-connected power by 2030, and we recently launched our national energy policy. Fiji also commits to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, Fiji, through our national ocean policy, will allocate 30% of our exclusive economic zone as marine protected areas and work towards 100% management of its EEZ by 2030. This complements Fiji's National Adaptation Plan, concurrently with its low-emission development strategy, which highlights the need to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems, strengthen their resilience and restore them when they are degraded. This includes conserving ocean reservoirs as carbon sinks through supporting the restoration, enhancement and conservation of coastal ecosystems such as mangroves, seagrasses and coral reefs. The key is strong partnership and collaboration with organizations such as TERI, as these are vital components of the global effort to tackle climate change and achieve environmental sustainability. We aim to create robust frameworks for sustainable development that can meet the aspirations of our people, while also mitigating the effects of climate change. South-South cooperation will offer a key set of opportunities for the developing countries to implement their NDCs. Finally, it is strategic that resilience measures align with the SDGs of the 2030 Agenda and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030. This has been our approach to Fiji's adaptation and resilience planning activities. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all vulnerable and we all need to act. So let us pledge to act now. Vinagavalevu, namaste, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now we have a virtual address by His Excellency. His Excellency Mr. Virginijus Sinkevičius, European Commission for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries from European Commission.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, our ocean faces unprecedented challenges: climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution. Today, it is finally at the center of the global conservation efforts. But we need to move one step further, or two even. One, we need to accelerate ocean action, and two, we need to turn challenges into opportunities. Opportunities for the ocean economy, opportunities to create jobs and support communities, and all this while protecting fragile ocean ecosystems. The EU is leading this transformative change. Ever since the European Green Deal, we have been moving away from harmful activities and towards cleaner, climate-friendly ones, driving a transition to a sustainable blue economy. We have set up several key enablers for sustainable ocean governance: maritime spatial planning, marine knowledge, blue skills, regional cooperation, maritime security, sustainable finance. Our approach extends across different sectors, each playing a crucial role in the journey to sustainability. Consider blue energy, especially offshore wind, and its potential role in meeting our emission reduction targets. Or ports, that in a fully circular global economy can act as clean energy and innovation hubs. Or consider one sector that concerns us all very directly: food. Here, innovative solutions from the sea promise it all: sustainability, security, nutrition. Aquaculture alone could cover 2/3 of our seafood consumption by 2030. Of course, the industry must develop in a sustainable way, and this is why the FAO guidelines for sustainable aquaculture must be promoted and implemented. Next to aquaculture, algae cultivation could also be a game changer for both food and non-food applications. These sectors not only alleviate pressure on wild fish stocks, but also generate revenue for rural and coastal communities around the world. Leading by example, the EU is implementing comprehensive policies that set high-quality standards. But this transformative agenda cannot stop at our borders. We need to cooperate with our international partners to have a common, sustainable approach, fair competition, optimal use of resources, and technological progress. This is why the EU engages in international fora where we champion sustainability and environmental progress worldwide. We share good practices and we try to inspire others. In less developed countries, for instance, we not only provide financial support, but also promote the principles of equality, decent labor conditions, and stakeholder participation. Illegal fishing is another area where we need to step up our collective efforts. As one of the main fisheries players, the EU is on the front line. We apply strict rules and controls on our fleets, and together with many other world countries, we have made some progress. But there is still a lot to do to strengthen fisheries management, enhance compliance, improve traceability, and create a level playing field in the global fishing industry. Ladies and gentlemen, the statement accompanying this year's theme is "Leadership plays a crucial role in driving change." I couldn't agree more. The EU is answering that call for leadership with an ambitious ocean agenda. But we know that real change only comes from working together, in Europe and everywhere else in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, and I must thank both the speakers for bringing their views on the table, and it goes without saying that oceans are something that must be protected. It's also that the food, the aquaculture, that it should be free of plastic, so somewhere we also have to look into that the marine pollution is prevented. And when we talk of the ships, it's also that they go from one country to the other and they are in the waters of different countries all the time. And therefore, how clean they are, and I'll like to mention over here that Government of India, they had set up Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways. They have set up National Center of Excellence for Green Ports and Shipping, which is with TERI. And we are collaborating with different ports of the country, and one is trying to look into what are the international regulations, what is it that the countries like us can actually follow, what kind of time frame is required, and what kind of partnerships, collaborations are essential. I always believe that we don't have to reinvent the broken wheel, but we all have to work together to make that wheel complete and effective. So innovations are as important as the partnerships, because what is existing today, we must make use of that. So with this, we come to the leadership address by Professor Celestino Silo, Secretary General, World Meteorological Organization. It's again virtual.
Distinguished participants, greetings to all. It is an honor to address you at this World Sustainable Development Summit. Our planet is experiencing unprecedented changes in weather patterns, leading to more severe and frequent extreme events. This is not just a future prediction, it is happening now. The World Meteorological Organization has consistently stressed the urgency of integrating climate change into sustainable development efforts. Since 1970, extreme weather, climate, and water-related disasters have resulted in nearly 12,000 events, leading to an astonishing 4.3 trillion in economic losses. Least developed countries and small island developing states have been impacted the most relative to the size of their economies. Yet, there is a positive aspect. Mortality rates from these disasters have greatly decreased, largely due to the effectiveness of early warning systems. National meteorological and hydrological services play a vital role to improve our understanding of weather, water, and climate, but also to develop effective adaptation and mitigation strategies. Our members deliver accurate, timely weather and climate data, which is crucial to inform decision makers. The work of the WMO community reinforces our collective responsibility and opportunity to create a sustainable future. Together, we can meet this challenge and construct a resilient, sustainable world for ourselves and future generations. Thank you very much.
Well, so very well said that we really have to ensure that the changing challenges before us, we do find solutions to those. And for that, I am sure the panel of eminent experts are going to throw some light what is being done and what more needs to be done. So I'll first come to Her Excellency Ms. May Steiner, Norwegian Ambassador to India. And first of all, welcome to India, because I know the commitment of Norway, and you are working with different countries on this issue and helping them with both the technology as well as, I'll say, the projects which run in partnership. So thanks for that. And I'll also like to ask you, what are the initiatives taken and what kind of results in a way you are expecting or you have already achieved in the recent past?
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Rayalu and Dr. Dhawan. Distinguished guests here, it's very nice to be here. I'm really honored to carry forward the Norwegian flag here at this conference and with TERI. And let me also congratulate TERI on turning 50. I know it has been celebrated yesterday, but wanted to add my voice. For 5 decades, your important work has been making itself heard, and it has been adopted all over India, but also all over the world. The World Sustainable Development Summit now illustrates this very well.
So we are really proud country partner, Norway, to this important gathering.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And of course, they are our partners for many years, which I'd like to acknowledge. Thank you for being partners for WSDS year after year. Thank you.
So last year was the hottest on record. We see extreme weather events all over the world. In December, we saw horrible pictures from Chennai that was ravaged by the cyclone Dhawan. And last week, as late as that, Norway was struck by the most powerful storm in many years. We called it Ingunn. And these events, they demonstrate how we really are facing the same challenges in the North Sea, in the Indian Ocean, and all over the world. So the challenges are multiplying. Our coasts are getting windier, wetter every year. So you were asking me, Dr. Dhawan, about examples. I'm going to give most of the examples from the Norway-India relationship, and would like to start by applauding the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways that you also mentioned. The leadership of Minister Sonowal, and he has really been putting forth ambitious goals to address these issues. The creation of the new Center of Excellence that you also mentioned is a really important step forward along with the 2047 vision for blue economy, which I believe sets a great example of a roadmap for the concrete steps forward. And Norway is trying to join forces with India as we can. Norway has been geographically forced to specialize in harsh and unpredictable weather. For those who don't know, we have a very long coastline. We have had to build robust infrastructure, not only to withstand the extreme weathers, but just to harness the powers that come from the winds that hit us. And with the Indian government, we now want to do the same along the Indian coast. We can collaborate very closely thanks to the India-Norway Ocean Dialogue, which was established in 2019 by Prime Minister Modi and the then Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg. That has created a good area of collaboration, and the key are shipbuilding, repair, recycling, a field which India also has set to become a global leader. Indian shipyards are delivering autonomous, zero-emission vessels to Norwegian ship owners. And at the same time, Norwegian technologies are contributing to the state-of-the-art ship repair facilities at Indian shipyards. This is an excellent example of maritime cooperation that goes both ways. In diversifying the global energy mix, the Indian government plans to establish 3 national hydrogen hubs, and this is key. The MOU between the Norwegian company Statkraft and the Dindayal port also enables this. Another example is that Norway wants to collaborate in all these areas: ocean renewables, sustainable green fuels, decarbonization in the maritime sector, and ocean clusters. Partnering with the International Maritime Organization, Norway and India are also looking to establish a maritime cluster project to catalyze this knowledge sharing. With these many platforms of collaboration, I believe we are very well equipped to face these complex challenges together. And I really look forward to this discussion here and other discussions on the next steps forward and how we can take this also globally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And one other area that I'm aware of, you are helping us, and that is how to keep the fish in the proper condition, so that because the tuna, which is from different countries, that fetches different price because of the quality. So there is an art that how do you keep it till you bring it to the shore. So that's also we are collaborating with Norway. Thank you so much. So I'll now come to Mr. Amit Proti, Director General, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure.
I think I've got mic'd up. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. And just listening to the panel before this, an institution that's already 50 years old, is very inspiring. Just to hear the stories, the images. I lead an organization that's 4 years old, and I have to acknowledge that a lot of TERI staff is actually also sitting in the office at CDRI. So it feels nice, and one of them is here, Dr. Suchismita, where the learning that got established here, the ethos of professionalism, etc., is now coming across to other parts, and I'm blessed to have quite a few people in the organization that are alumni of TERI. So first of all, congratulations on that 50 years.
Thank you.
CDRI is a very new organization, and it's intended to focus on disaster resilient infrastructure. We're a coalition of now 39 countries and 7 organizations. It's been flagship by the government of India. It's given the amount of infrastructure that we are building and the amount of infrastructure that's being built in the global south generally. I think this was a vision of the Prime Minister himself about 5 years ago to say, how do we show leadership to the globe in this space? Setting up the coalition was one way to do it. And so for us, it's all about coalition building, partnerships, and bringing knowledge from one part of the world to another. As you said, the wheel is broken, and let's find how do we share things to connect the dots to the extent that we can. As an organization which is focused purely on resilience of infrastructure, we spend a lot of time thinking about, the risk to infrastructure from disasters. And when I say that, it includes your natural hazards, earthquakes, landslides, etc., but also climate change. Last year, we came out with a report that estimated that just asset loss globally on an annual basis is something in the tune of $300 to $330 billion of risk that we are carrying to our assets. When you add buildings to that, we are carrying something like $800 billion of risk. And when you add disrupted services, we're in the $1 trillion range. And why is that important? Because it starts to, when we're talking about economic development, when we're talking about sustainable development, and we realize that sometimes countries, Fiji, other countries, the amount of risk to the GDP because of a disaster is quite substantial, and it needs to be addressed. So today, just in the context of this discussion, I'll just highlight 3 things that we're trying to focus on. I think one, when you're doing your financial projections for infrastructure, so for example, there is about $500 billion of money going into building or refurbishing ports right now. And this infrastructure is going to last you for 50, 60, 70 years. How do, in our financial projections, we start to acknowledge that you're projecting a certain service over that lifespan of that infrastructure, but you may lose 5 to 10 to 15% because of a cyclone, because of a flood, because of something else. So we're trying to see how does one start to embed this understanding of risk into financial metrics. Very closely related to that is data. We talk about climate science, climate risk, but I think all of us in this room recognize that we don't have enough downscale data to actually start bringing it into the decision-making process. So last year at COP, we launched a global database of risk. It actually looks at 8 infrastructure sectors at 6 hazards. Norwegian Geotechnical Institute was part of that effort. So, they looked at the landslide risk, for example. Just to start to understand globally where is this risk concentrated. It's, of course, a geospatial database, and it's at a country level. So it still doesn't give you the fine-grained information. And we are starting to say, we really need to make a push for downscaling information that can then be brought into other decisions. So that's the second thing that we're trying to do. The third thing is, when we think about port infrastructure, for example, it's interconnected to a lot of different systems. So starting to think about how do we approach infrastructure resilience from a systemic approach. So for example, if you're upgrading your port or you're building a new port, and the port may be resilient, but if your rail system or your road system that's connecting to the port is not, well, it doesn't matter if your port is resilient because you're not able to move your goods, etc. Right? So we're trying to push in this particular space on how do you start to look at this interconnectedness of systems, and we have launched a pilot for seaport resilience, for example, in that space. So climate information, financial metrics, understanding risk, and then we're starting to do a lot of pilot projects to actually build infrastructure resilience from a systemic perspective. Those are the three things I'll offer you today.
Thank you so much, and that is what I'll also like to put on record, that Government of India is very active, and that is how this institution has came into existence just about 4 years back. And it goes without saying because everything is so interconnected. We are also looking at the climate models, what different countries, what different cities are going to look like in future because of the changing climate or the sea level rise and so on. And that is where perhaps the insurance companies will also play a role. Where should you set up the new infrastructure, and what kind of precautions you should take before you set up the infrastructure. So it's really great work which you are doing, and I'm sure that, all of us would like to collaborate further, because ultimately we all are working towards one goal. And that under the National Center of Excellence also, we are looking into, and that it's, you very, very rightly mentioned that port can be green, but then what about the other logistics? So it's not going to serve the purpose if you take care of the entire value chain. So great, and that's where the partnerships in terms of if they have experience in hydrogen, can we bring it to India? And that's one good example with Deen Dayal Upadhyaya port. So that is the way forward, I should say, for us to succeed. I now come to Shloka Nath, who is CEO of India Climate Collaborative. And Shloka, of course, she is very active in this sphere of working in issues related to climate change and what action should be taken. So over to you, Shloka.
Thank you, Vibha. And just to sort of add my congratulations to all of the other panelists. It's 50 years, and I think particularly at a sort of very important time for India. I always say that, we're very unusual in terms of the challenge that we face here. It's the twin issue of development while decarbonizing. So it couldn't be sort of more, important, and I think TERI's relevance is only growing stronger and stronger. So thank you very much for having me here. Thank you for also having a conversation on adaptation and the criticality of sort of building that resilience infrastructure. I think something Amrit's pointed out already is sort of the large, vast canvas of finance that is required to sort of meet these needs. We at the ICC work specifically with philanthropic capital, and what we try to do is really build that ecosystem of both civil society organizations and the solutions that they're working on and how to scale those, while also trying to build funder capacity to fund, seed, really drive innovation in these spaces. So we sort of work on both ends of the spectrum. And I'll sort of limit my remarks to 3 critical points. Amrit, I'm going to follow in your shoes and pick up a troika as well. I think there are 3 areas in which we're seeing, grant capital. It's a much smaller subset of private and public, but it is incredibly catalytic. And there are 3 areas in which we think it's going to be really fundamental to building resilience. The first is philanthropic capital can really augment data that's required by government to build resilience infrastructure, and I'll give you an example of this. So one of the big projects that we're funding at the ICC and that we've helped seed is the Council on Energy, Environment and Water's Climate Risk Atlas for India. A big struggle in this country is getting local, granular data around hydrometeorological events that are taking place in this country. We're finding that previously drought-prone areas are now facing floods and cyclones. You're having multiple hydrometeorological events at the same time. And that's increasing climate risk uncertainties. Forecasting is getting very difficult. And we're not able to build the necessary resilience infrastructure that we require as a result. So what we really do need are these sort of risk assessment tools and methodologies on the ground that can help us build out that data, that can then feed into local climate action plans, state policies, and of course at the national level as well. So the Climate Risk Atlas is one such tool. CDRI, of course, is a partner in this. And I'm happy to say that today it's being used by state governments across the country to fill in their vital sort of plans within their state disaster management plans, as well as state climate action plans. That's one such example of a sort of innovation on the ground, and where grant capital can play a really critical role, augmenting data for government. The second is really around building holistic solutions when it comes to green infrastructure. So we've talked about the importance of oceans. Blue carbon is a really important area. We know that, for instance, the mitigation potential of mangroves is 40 times more than that of tropical forests. Yet, what we're finding is that the sort of area cover of mangroves is shrinking considerably across this country. So what we're seeing is a need for really holistic solutions that will build in nature-based and biodiversity approaches to the climate problem. We cannot divorce biodiversity and nature from climate anymore. And again, philanthropy plays a critical role here. To give you a quick example, we're funding an organization called Vikas. They work on the western coast, across the whole coast of Gujarat. They are building a massive mangrove bioshield. The importance of this is not just that, of course, it's going to prevent flooding and cyclones. It'll also add to reducing heat stress. But more importantly, there's a critical equity lens here, because it is also helping augment livelihoods and incomes for the communities that are dependent on these sort of areas. So I think that's something that we have to look at very clearly. The community ownership piece, the fact that these solutions have to sort of address larger SDGs when we look at resilience, and that they must be integrated into nature and biodiversity concerns. And the third piece, I would say, really is the importance of philanthropic capital being used to really trigger public and private investments. We have to leverage greater pools of capital. And again, within resilience, a big piece that has come up, of course, over the last few COPs has been the loss and damage piece. We know that the fund has been operationalized now. But here in India, calculating loss and damage is a big, big task. So to give you an example, we spend about INR 4 billion a year on relief. That's only actually meeting 30% of our relief and rehabilitation needs. When it comes to sort of compensation, we found that community needs are 2.5 times higher than what they're actually receiving in terms of actual compensation. The ADB has done studies where they found that the average household in India takes 19 years to recover from disasters in terms of the economic loss and damage. And yet the accounting for this is very top down. It's the state departments, it's the government authorities that do this. Relief and rehabilitation does not currently account for the total amount of economic and non-economic loss and damage. And so again, there are very innovative approaches on the ground. There's an organization called Seeds. They're building the first ever e-wallet for loss and damage in the country. They've partnered up with Amazon India to do this. It's going to be a big global initiative, and India is the test country. And what they've managed to do is build, using AI tools, allow communities to input data around loss and damage, both economic and non-economic. And what that has meant is bringing in insurance and housing corporations. It's meant bringing in CSR. It's meant other CSOs, government authorities at the state and national level can also come in for real-time, transparent accountability and relief and rehabilitation, immediately, which didn't exist before. So some very quick examples. But just to sort of point out that, one big piece in sort of building out resilience is going to be grant capital, and these are the ways in which it can augment the sort of trajectory that we're on already. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shloka, and bringing the role of philanthropy, which is extremely important, because let's not expect everything from the common. And the other is that many times it becomes the seed money. So you get started and thereafter you grow and grow. One thing which you also mentioned, good you brought that, which is very close to my heart, is that how do you ensure, because if you look at oceans, the productivity of ocean, whether it's in terms of biomass or it's in terms of fixation of CO2, that is highest. It's much more than the terrestrial system, which we are not utilizing at the moment. And in fact, one project in which TERI is involved in is that we are using seawater for growing alga, where we are looking at biofuel as one of the byproducts. So because lipid, if you are getting 20%, what do you do with the remaining 80%? And you'll be surprised that you can get the different components out of it. Depending on the strain of alga which you grow, you get nutraceuticals, you get vitamin A, and even you can prepare plastic from the leftover. And it's rich in protein. So if you feed to the kettle, the productivity increases. So we have to look in totality. And again, you mentioned about mangroves. So there is also potential to get carbon credits. So the communities which traditionally, the coastal communities, they are comparatively poorer because they have few livelihood opportunities. So definitely one can look into these as well. So thank you so much. And now we come to the last speaker of the panel, that is Mr. Himanshu Mishra, who is senior editor with NDTV.
Yes, thank you. Respected Vibha ma'am, my fellow panelists, I wish to start with a conversation I had with UN Secretary General when he was here last time, ahead of the G20 summit, just a day ahead of the summit. And I told him that I use the facts that you share on public platforms on disaster risk reduction. And recently you've been using one phrase very frequently, and that is climate change is running much faster than we are, and the world is not doing anything. So ahead of the G20 summit, what do you think the top global leaders who have assembled in Delhi should do to actually address the concern that you have? And this is what he said, very important. My main expectation is that G20 countries assume their responsibilities. If there is climate change, 80% of the emissions have a lot to do with it. And 80% of the emissions come from G20 countries. So G20 countries must assume leadership. Assume leadership on two fronts. First, in reducing emissions, and second, in climate justice. Now, 2 months later, UNEP released a report which was titled Broken Record, Emissions Gap Report 2023, Broken Record, Temperatures Hit New High, Yet World Fails to Cut Emissions. Now this followed 2 months after what UN Secretary General had told me in an interview. And the UNEP report said that today the projected increase is 3%. However, predicted 2030 greenhouse gas emissions still must fall by 28% for the Paris Agreement 2 degrees Celsius pathway and 42% for the 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. So that is how far we are actually behind the main issue that needs to be addressed to actually address the issue of climate change. And that brings me to a proposal that I wish to put before you. This is largely a legislative and I would say an institutional approach, a new legislative and a new institutional approach actually to address the growing threat of climate change and the rise in the intensity, frequency and scale of disaster incidents. Ahead of the COP28 meeting, UN Secretary General in fact went to Antarctica, and very powerful visuals and images that he posted on his Twitter, and he said that climate change is wreaking havoc, fossil fuels are the male culprit. In Antarctica, I saw for myself and heard from scientists how ice loss is accelerating in dangerous ways. And this was at a time when NASA released a report with details of how summer of 2023 was Earth's hottest since global records began in 1880. 90% of global warming is occurring in the ocean, causing the water's internal heat to increase since modern record keeping began in 1955. The annual rate of rise, that is how quickly sea levels rise is happening, has increased from 0.08 inches per year in 1993 to the current yearly rate of 0.17 inches per year. And this is where I think we need to have a new approach, a new legislative and an institutional approach. And this is the frequency, the intensity, the scale of disaster incidents arising in India and globally as well. And a lot of information has been tabled in Parliament of India as well, and we have been reporting extensively on that. Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav, who was here yesterday, in a written reply in Lok Sabha on 7th August 2023, just 3 points I want to say. India's average temperature has risen by around 0.7 degrees Celsius during 1901 to 2018. Sea level rise in the North Indian Sea occurred at a rate of 3.3 mm per year in the last 2.5 decades, that is 1993 to 2017. And frequency of severe cyclonic storms over Arabian Sea has increased during the post-monsoon seasons of 1998 to 2018. So increasingly, the impact of climate change is becoming visible in these abnormal weather events. That takes me to a detailed report released by United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. This is a 4-decade study of how climate change actually is leading to more disasters. Just a couple of facts I want to put before you. The report was titled The Human Cost of Disasters, 2000 to 2019. It said, in the period 2000 to 2019, there were 7,348 major recorded disaster events, claiming 1.23 million lives, affecting 4.2 billion people, resulting in approximately $2.97 trillion in global economic losses. I think Amit sir had also mentioned this important point. And this is a sharp increase over the previous 20 years. Rising climate-related disasters, including extreme weather events, have risen from 3,656 climate-related events between 1980 and 1999 to 6,681 climate-related disasters in the period 2000 to 2009. This is the most comprehensive study that I found. And importantly, this takes me to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, there's a lot of concern whether the global community will be able to meet the targets that have been enshrined in SDG, and a very comprehensive document which was adopted by global consensus. India is a signatory to SDGs, but the global community again is far behind where they should have been. And this point again, UN Secretary General in an interaction with journalists here in Delhi had also said, halfway to the 2030 deadline, the world is woefully off track. Weather, climate and water related sciences can supercharge progress. Uniting in science is key to progress. And then World Meteorological Organization said in a report, new multi-agency report headed by WMO states that in 2023, the halfway mark to the 2030 agenda, climate change undermines nearly all sustainable development goals. Climate science and services are central to solutions. Again and again, we see United Nations flagging this issue off, and that brings me to the central idea of my presentation, the new legislative and an institutional approach to address the growing concern on climate change. I'll just finish in 2 minutes, ma'am. One, reforming the Disaster Management Act, which was formulated in 2005. It's 19 years old. For the last 10 years, we have heard several times. And at one time, the former Home Minister Arnab Singh had said that we are going to bring in amendment to the bill, to the Act. It has so far not happened. So we need to also quickly reform India's Disaster Management Act. A new capacity building and institutional approach in the wake of the melting of glaciers. Now, this is again a report that was tabled in Parliament which said there is a severe shortage of meteorological and monitoring stations in the Indian Himalayan region, and NDRF, which is India's nodal force to deal with disasters, is not equipped with modern muck cleaning instruments and equipments to deal with emergent situations such as the one that arose in Chamoli district of Uttarakhand in the month of February 2021. And there was a considerable delay as part of the rescue team in reaching the disaster site. And the reason cited was that there is no dedicated aircraft service available with NDRF. So you need to do a lot of capacity building of the primary institutions which have the primary responsibility to protect us from disasters. Need to set up separate dedicated mountain hazard and research institute. Need to provide sufficient budgetary allocations for glacier research. Need to have robust early warning systems. And the committee, the parliamentary committee, expressed concern that Himalayan glaciers and glacial lakes are not being monitored or observed on a scale on which they should have been. And we have seen in Uttarakhand several incidents have happened. And the last point, a national disaster communication policy, I think, is becoming more and more urgent. I've done one recent report that NDMA has actually conceived the Common Alerting Protocol based integrated alert system. I'm sure many of you must have been receiving these alert messages from NDMA. This is part of a test pilot study now that is going on for the first time in India, and in the coming months, government also plans to carry out test runs for broadcasting urgent disaster alerts, warning messages on TV, radio, and railway stations as well. And this is, I think, where Japan's J alert early warning system and an L alert system in Japan is something that India should study because you need a global approach, and the countries not only need to share the best practices that they are following in their respective countries, especially US and Japan, two one of the worst disaster affected countries in the world. So we need to learn that. And the last question is on funding, ma'am, just last 2 points. RBI in a report, again this was extensively reported, said it was called RBI's report on currency and finance 2022-23. It was released in May 2023, and on green finance it says the cumulative total expenditure for adapting to climate change in India is estimated to be 85.6 lakh crore. In dollar terms, it will be little over $1 trillion is what is needed. But 4 years back, the former Minister of State for Environment, Mahesh Sharma, told Lok Sabha in a written reply, as per the country's nationally determined contribution submitted to the UNFCCC in 2015, at least $2.5 trillion will be required to meet its 2030 targets. So the question is of finance, question is of amassing resources that are needed, the question is of a new institutional approach, setting up new institutions, and most importantly, to reform India's Disaster Management Act, which is now 19 years old.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mishra. And bringing all these points of financing, capacity building, that again, they are extremely important, and I'm sure our government is taking that into account. It's philanthropic organizations which have stepped in. So we will find solutions. That's what one should be very optimistic, because the first step is identifying the magnitude of the problem. Data is lacking, but whatever data is available, that definitely tells us that immediate action is required, and what we are doing is far from satisfaction. I apologize, I'll have to close this panel because we are running late. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'm sure all the panelists are here and you'll have opportunity to interact with them during lunchtime and otherwise. So thank you all. And I'm sure you are going to enjoy now the thematic tracks as well. Thank you. And give a big applause to the panelists. It was very good. I learned a lot.
I request all the speakers to gather for a group photo. Once again, thank you to our respected speakers and everyone who joined online. We invite you to attend other sessions, thematic tracks and expo. The next session is scheduled at 2 p.m. at the Stein Auditorium. Please don't forget to tag us on all the social media platforms using hashtag Act for Earth and hashtag WSTS 2024. Thank you everyone for your time and cooperation.